Hi everyone, welcome back to Radio Night Crime. Before you drift off, let me know in the comments where you're listening from. If you're enjoying the stories, don't forget to like and subscribe. Now let's relax and jump into tonight's case. Story 1. When discussing the most infamous murders in Malaysia, one cannot overlook the name Mona Fanda. This wicked woman, along with her husband, brutally murdered a politician, all driven by insatiable greed. The details surrounding this case have filled countless newspaper columns and remain a terror in the minds of Malaysians to this day. Now let's turn back the clock to the early 1990s. Back then, a Malaysian state assemblyman mysteriously vanished after attending a party conference. Before disappearing, he called his wife, saying he had some business to attend to outside, promising he'd be home soon. But after that, it seemed as if the man had completely vanished from the face of the earth, with no one knowing where he had gone or what he had done. The police later discovered that the assemblyman's disappearance was closely linked to a couple practicing witchcraft. As the investigation deepened, one murder case after another was brought to light. The story unfolds in peninsular Malaysia, in the eastern state of Pahang, an area rich in forest resources, covering up to 75% of its total area. The economy primarily depends on agriculture. In the western part of Pahang lies Rob District, one of the oldest districts on the peninsula, known for its gold mines and the famous Musang King durian. On July 18, 1993, on an early Sunday morning, the Rob police received a report from an employee of the Rob UMNO branch, UMNO being the acronym for the United Malays National Organization, a political party in Malaysia. The informant stated that his colleague, Mazlan, had been absent from several internal party meetings since July 10th, over a week prior, and despite everyone's efforts, they couldn't contact him. The man suspected something might have gone wrong, and wanted to report it to the police for investigation. The day before, Mazlan's wife had also gone to the police station to report her husband's situation. At 9:30 p.m. on Friday, July 2nd, he had called home to say he was very busy with work in Law Busu, and would try to return as soon as possible. If not, he would come back the next day. However, by Monday, July 5th, Mazlan had not returned home. His wife, increasingly anxious, kept calling him, but no one answered. With an internal election for the regional chairman position approaching, his family thought he might be dealing with some issue that prevented external communication, but he was absent from all recent meetings, and all searches proved futile. It was known that Mazlan was very ambitious about securing the position of regional chairman, so his continuous absence was akin to him giving up on his opportunity. A week later, the formal election meeting took place, and Mazlan still did not appear. His disappearance was discussed during the meeting. People searched the area but found no trace of him, with no way to make contact. 2 weeks after Mazlan's disappearance, his wife requested the local police in Law Busu to investigate her husband's whereabouts. Upon receiving the report, the police began tracking Mazlan's mobile phone signals and conducted a search for the missing person. The last signal from his phone was at 9:30 p.m. on July 2nd, the same night Mazlan called his wife to inform her his schedule. After that, there were no more calls. Investigators, after checking surveillance cameras in the Lawak area, found that on the night of July 2nd, the assemblyman drove to a bank and withdrew 300,000 ringgit. After that, there was no further information on his whereabouts. The police have made the case public in hopes someone might provide new leads. Missing person, Mazlan Idris, 49 years old, a state senator in Pahang, Malaysia, a member of UMNO. Speaking of Mazlan, in his youth, he was sent to the US for training, later returning to Malaysia to pursue his career and dreams. Mazlan was known for being cheerful and sociable, with excellent communication skills. Both his personal and professional life were very successful. After years of hard work, Mazlan ascended to the rank of Datuk within the party. Datuk is a prestigious title given to those of high repute, an honor symbolizing significant contributions to the country. Mazlan was a well-known local political figure, yet mysteriously, he disappeared without a trace. The news of a prominent figure's disappearance was announced by the police, and media outlets began to follow and update the situation, making the case known to more and more people. Not long after, the police received a new lead from a man who said he had bought a car from a couple the previous week, the car and license plate matching Mazlan's. Based on this lead, the police found the couple who sold the car to him. They were the same couple linked to Mazlan before his disappearance, both practicing witchcraft. In Southeast Asia, witches are also known as hypnotists, divided into black and white witches. Black witches take money from people to perform hypnosis and unethical acts as requested by clients, while white witches help others break free from hypnosis, engaging in charitable acts. Here, the number of people choosing witchcraft as a profession is not small, with various rituals and types of magic prevalent. The practice of magic is widespread in Malaysia, and it's not unusual for police to rely on witchcraft and spiritual practices to solve cases. The couple known as Mona were both practitioners of witchcraft, providing services to many affluent clients, including high-ranking officials. These clients were often quite generous, willing to pay significant sums for rituals they believed would advance their political careers. As a result, the couple amassed considerable wealth. They lived in Malaysia, in a luxurious villa, drove fancy cars, and led a very comfortable, lavish life. Upon obtaining this information, the police immediately moved to the couple's residence. The house was located quite far from the city center, surrounded by mountains, forests, and wastelands. When investigators opened the door, a strange, foul smell overwhelmed them, forcing them to cover their noses and mouths as they entered. The atmosphere felt eerie and bizarre. The house was cluttered with tools and paraphernalia used for their rituals. In a small room, the police discovered a large shelf filled with various bottles and jars. In another room, several photos of the female homeowner adorned the walls. Everything inside suggested neglect, as if it hadn't been cleaned in ages. The scene resembled more of an abandoned house than a lived-in home. In one corner, the police suddenly found a man sleeping amidst the chaos of items. This was Jareem, a 32-year-old man, who upon being woken, looked disoriented, as if under the influence of drugs. The investigation team quickly detained him. Thus, in this raid, the police did not find the Mona couple. After sobering up, Jareem confessed to the police about his relationship with the witch couple. He was their assistant. When asked if he knew Maslin, Jareem quickly admitted that he, along with Mona and her husband, had conspired to kill the man on the night of July 2nd. However, he claimed not to know the current whereabouts of the couple. 20 days after the case broke, based on information provided by Jareem, the police discovered another house belonging to the Mona couple in a remote village in Lawak. Upon entering, investigators found an axe, 2 daggers, a revolver for bullets, various ritual items, and 3 statues representing different religions. In a nearby shed, the police noticed a fresh layer of concrete on the ground, which raised their suspicions, leading them to decide to excavate it. The result was shocking. Beneath was a 1.8-meter deep pit, from which they retrieved 18 pieces of human remains. Forensic examination confirmed these belonged to Maslin, who had been reported missing for several days. The victim had been dismembered, with all flesh removed, leaving only bones. A week later, the investigation team found yet another residence of the Mona couple near the Kemaman residential area in Ganmawan. Here they unearthed 3 more bodies, confirmed through autopsy to be Chin Jinan, 26 years old, Lu Baobao, 25 years old, and their 5-month-old son, Chen Boliu from Klangpong. Another week passed, and 3 more bone fragments were discovered in another of the couple's apartments. The police suspected these might be linked to a headless body case from 2 years ago in the fishing village of Banting. The deeper the investigation went, the more connections were uncovered between the deceased and politicians linked to the witch couple Mona. The police began to suspect that 6 missing women might also be connected to them, as each had last been seen with the couple before disappearing. After a long effort, the police finally traced the witch couple to Kuala Lumpur, where they were spending their money, even buying a luxurious car. Ultimately, the Mona couple was arrested on charges of murder. The woman you see on your screen now is Mona Fendi, born in 1956 in Kongar, in northern Malaysia. Raised by her grandparents, she had a passion for singing from a young age and dreamed fervently of becoming a singing star. In reality, Mona is just a stage name. Her real name is Nurmazna binti Ismail. She was married 4 times and had 6 children in total. Her first husband was a teacher, with whom she had a daughter. The first marriage ended quickly, and Mona moved alone to Kuala Lumpur, where she revived her childhood dream of becoming a singer. She performed at nightclubs and met a Special Forces soldier from Kuantan. They fell in love and married soon after. Mona gave up singing to stay home and wholeheartedly care for their family, which was very happy with their 2 sons. However, due to her husband's job, they saw each other less and gradually grew apart. Their marriage lasted only a few years before ending. After the divorce, both sons stayed with their father, and Mona decided to return to her singing career. With her clear voice, striking features, and proud physique, Mona became the most popular and beloved singer in the nightclubs of that time. Here, she caught the eye of a businessman who was completely smitten with her. Facing his relentless pursuit, Mona quickly fell in love and entered into her third marriage. In this marriage, she had a boy and a girl. This time, she was more experienced and didn't abandon her singing career, continuing to perform at bars and nightclubs. Initially, her husband supported this, but over time, he couldn't tolerate her daily appearances at such venues and started following her to her performances. Eventually, this marriage also ended. Custody of the children went to her husband after the marriage ended. Mona soon met her fourth husband, Muhammad, now a professional witch, who claimed to be her #1 fan. He promised Mona he would use his connections to help her become a Malaysian music superstar. Not long after, Muhammad funded her first solo music album, released under the stage name Mona. Their relationship grew closer, and they eventually married, having a daughter together. Mona promoted her music album on Malaysia's third television channel. She appeared on the Music show, organizing a prediction game with a significant cash prize for the winner. Despite investing a large amount of money in her singing career, the results did not meet expectations. Realizing that continuing would make it hard to become famous, Mona decided to give up singing and venture into new business areas, becoming a witch like her husband. In 1989, when Mona was 33, she and Muhammad opened a school for magic healing in a forest near the mountains in Kuantan. The couple used the guise of a dance troupe to lure students abroad for selling flowers. With their combined knowledge and compatible personalities, their witchcraft business flourished. Mona publicly claimed that their magic was divinely assisted. Through this work, they amassed a considerable fortune. They spent 5.8 million ringgit to buy an island in Thailand, planning to develop it into a tourist spot. However, the project required hundreds of millions of ringgit, which they didn't have, so they used the investment as a pretext to scam people around them. When Mona was arrested, she claimed to be 37 years old, of Chinese descent with royal Malaysian blood, though her grandmother revealed she was actually nearing 50. A month after the case broke, a man who claimed to be a fellow student in feng shui with the couple told the media that their island in Thailand was nothing more than a scam. He had almost become a victim himself. The reason their scheme was exposed was due to the numerous flaws in the couple's publicized plans, leading to the swift failure of their fraudulent endeavor. This fellow student also spoke about their past when they studied under a master witch. The Mona couple had lived secluded in the deep forests of Medan, Indonesia, to learn advanced spells. Both Mona and her husband were obsessed with witchcraft, having a habit of sleeping naked on the floor to absorb the earth's spiritual energy, even while staying at others' homes. When asked what they were doing, they would reply that they were absorbing the spiritual energy of the universe. There's another bizarre story related to Mona. Several years before the incident, various media outlets reported on her miraculous resurrection. According to Mona, she only remembered being on a business trip in Australia when suddenly she was kidnapped and murdered by some nefarious individual who dismembered her and tossed her into the sea. However, a miracle happened. Mona unexpectedly came back to life, without any wounds on her body, and safely returned to Malaysia. To prove what she had gone through, Mona allowed journalists to inspect her neck, which bore no scars. She also showed others newspaper articles related to her supposed death to exaggerate her tale. A journalist who interviewed Mona said that she claimed to have learned magic from a talented shaman in the deep mountains of Indonesia. This master had dismembered her into 18 pieces, then restored her body to its original state. After 14 days, the master performed a ritual that allowed Mona to resume her life as before. Since then, her witchcraft powers had grown immensely, and she regained the youthful appearance of a young girl. From predicting the weather to mysteriously creating wealth, nothing was beyond Mona's capabilities. Some media reports suggested that the money she used to buy the island in Thailand was magically conjured by her. Many also believed in her resurrection story from Australia. Apart from running physical therapy classes for witches, Mona and her husband also organized magic classes in Klang, west of Kuala Lumpur. According to local residents, Mona had many eccentric behaviors, like teaching magic while wearing only underwear. Both Mona and Muhammad had a penchant for eating black dog, black cat, and crow meat, and they required their students to partake in these meals, leading some to leave due to this practice. Among them, one former student claimed that teacher Mona possessed special supernatural abilities, revered and worshipped by her disciples. She could leap over a bamboo pole suspended between two 6-meter-high coconut trees and land gracefully. The couple's physiotherapy clinic for witches was in Kuantan, where they had a 32-year-old assistant named Jeremy. The clinic mainly used magic to treat diseases and exorcise evil spirits. For particular patients, Mona would require them to purchase holy medicine for better treatment results. If a patient was cured, she would boast about her witchcraft prowess, but if the patient's condition worsened, she'd blame them for not following her instructions, claiming that evil spirits were tormenting them for their disobedience. 8 months before the incident, Pahang, Malaysia, was preparing for a new election cycle. Mazlan, facing fierce competition, was extremely anxious about losing, so he sought help from the witch couple's clinic in Kuantan. Mazlan revealed his political ambitions, not wanting to lose the upcoming election, thus asking for the couple's magical assistance. Mona easily sensed Mazlan's fervor. She saw an opportunity to earn a fortune, and told him they would certainly help him achieve his dreams, but they needed 3 sacred artifacts to perform the ritual, costing 2.5 million ringgit. Mazlan thought the price was high, but considering his future, decided to take the risk. Do you wonder what those 3 sacred artifacts are? Mona said they already possessed 2 of the 3 artifacts, some Sukarno's cane, the first president of Indonesia, and a songkok hat. The songkok, also known as pitsi or kopia, is widely worn in Indonesia, Brunei, Malaysia, Singapore, southern Philippines, and southern Thailand, especially among Muslim men. They were missing the 3rd artifact, Sukarno's amulet. Once they gathered all 3, the ritual could proceed, and power and money would be Mazlan's. Overwhelmed by the seductive promises, he trusted Mona's magical powers without any doubt. Mona then stated they needed to quickly travel to Indonesia to retrieve Sukarno's amulet and return to Malaysia to perform the ritual. Mazlan was asked to pay in advance to support the witch couple's trip to Indonesia. Without hesitation, he agreed, paying an advance of 500,000 ringgit, with the remaining 2 million ringgit to be arranged later. In the meantime, he gave 10 land title deeds as collateral to Mona and her husband. On the night of the incident, February 7, 1993, Mazlan called his wife, Datin, to inform her of his schedule. Then he left with Mona and her husband from the Raw Bumno office to a remote village where they had a house. Before heading there, Mazlan withdrew 300,000 ringgit from his personal account at the bank, marking the second payment, with the remaining amount to be settled later. Upon reaching the village, the assemblyman was led into the house by the witch couple. That night, they held a magical ceremony. Mazlan lay on the ground while Mona chanted spells and scattered flowers over him. As the ceremony neared its end, while reciting the final incantation, the witch whispered into Mazlan's ear, "Close your eyes and wait for the money to fall from the sky." The assemblyman could never have imagined that what would fall from the sky was not the wealth or power he'd dreamed of, but instead a deadly axe. In reality, that night in the house, it wasn't just Mona, her husband, and Mazlan. There was another person present, the assistant named Jeremy. He had entered the house earlier and stayed hidden in the shadows. Mazlan kept his eyes closed throughout the ritual, while Jeremy waited for the right moment. Then he rushed out from a corner, axe in hand, and struck Mazlan's neck with one fatal blow. The unfortunate man had no idea what was about to happen to him, thus offering no resistance, and he met his end at the hands of these wicked fiends. After Mazlan's death, Mona, her husband, and Jeremy dismembered him into 18 pieces and took them to a nearby shed. There they had already dug a 1.8-meter deep pit to bury Mazlan's remains, which they then covered with a thick layer of concrete. Following this, the couple hired lawyers to handle the paperwork to transfer ownership of Mazlan's 10 land parcels into their names. With the money they gained, they went to Kuala Lumpur, where they spent lavishly. Mona went on a shopping spree for clothes, jewelry, and expensive cars, even undergoing facial surgery. What the witch couple hadn't anticipated was that just 20 days after the crime, Malaysian police found Mazlan's remains, and shortly thereafter, all 3 conspirators were apprehended. Facing murder charges, Mona and her husband confessed, but showed no signs of remorse. What horrified people more was that Mazlan was not their only victim. There were a total of 5 deaths and 6 disappearances linked to them. According to rumors, the couple's brutal killings were not just for financial gain, but also to perform higher-level magic. A year after Mazlan's death, the case was brought to trial at the Temelo High Court, with Mona, her husband, and Jeremy charged with premeditated murder. The trial attracted significant media attention, both domestically and internationally. Reporters present described how Mona paid careful attention to her appearance, dressing meticulously and with makeup for each court appearance. With her slender, tall figure, she favored tight-fitting clothes. The trial sessions were numerous, and each time Mona appeared with a different hairstyle. She preferred black and red, believing red made her the center of attention, while black symbolized her mastery of witchcraft. When facing photographers, Mona would naturally flash a bright, radiant smile, as if she were posing for a fashion magazine cover, rather than standing trial. This made her infamous across the country, though she never imagined her fame would come from being known as a cruel witch, rather than a singer. After 2 months of trial, the Temalo High Court delivered its final verdict, sentencing Mona Fonda, Mohammed Nura Fonda, and Jeremy Hassan to death. They appealed to the court, but their appeals were rejected, maintaining the death sentence. They then tried to seek a pardon from the Pahang State Pardons Board, but this too was denied. On November 2, 2001, 8 years after the crime, the trio had their last meal and were executed, officially closing one of Malaysia's most horrific cases. In her last moments before execution, Mona looked up to the sky, laughed loudly, and said, "I will never die." Her words sent chills down the spines of those present. Although the wicked woman paid the ultimate price for her heinous crimes, the public remained haunted by her deeds. There were even widespread rumors that in the prison where Mona and her husband were held, guards often heard strange voices and sounds at night, making them reluctant to work night shifts there. Local media, upon receiving this information, invited a skilled shaman to the shed where Maslin was buried to assess the situation. After several rounds around the site, the shaman stated, "There are 2 lingering souls here unwilling to leave, one of them being the soul of the witch Mona, and the other a bearded man." A photographer present agreed with this assessment, having once captured a photo showing the face of a bearded man. Prison guards recounted that Mona often slept with her eyes half open. Whenever they patrolled, they felt as if someone was staring intently at them from behind. Sometimes she would hum songs to herself for amusement, then sit in a corner muttering alone, appearing quite frightening. There were rumors that she was casting spells to summon evil spirits to help her escape. Some also claimed to have seen Mona and her husband outside the prison during the time they were incarcerated. To prevent the worst from happening, the police even increased the number of guards in the period leading up to the execution. Locals around the area have rumored that they've seen the apparition of Mona, which further fuels the speculation that her magic was so powerful that she was nearly indestructible. The house where Mona once lived has turned into an abandoned, haunted house. Some brave souls ventured inside to test their courage, and they all shared the observation. They felt an indescribable malevolent force immediately upon entering the house. The chilling story of the witch Mona has been adapted into a horror film titled Dukuan. Initially planned for release in 2007, the movie was banned by the Malaysian government due to its sensitive and gory content. However, an uncut version of the film somehow found its way onto the internet in early 2018, gaining public attention, and it was officially released on April 5, 2018. Moreover, the character Mona, an astrologer in the game Genshin Impact, is rumored to be inspired by the real-life witch. To this day, no one can verify whether the powerful spells Mona wielded were real or not, but what cannot be denied is the terror she sowed and brought upon the people of Malaysia. Story 2. As the case of rapper Diddy heats up in Hollywood, audiences recall that Hong Kong's entertainment industry has its own equally frightening figure who has been accused multiple times, yet continues to live unabashedly. That man is Eric Sang Chi Wai. Indeed, Sang is now the general manager of Hong Kong's largest television station, TVB, commanding respect from everyone in the entertainment circle. In November 2023, amid a crackdown on electronic fraud from Myanmar, a birthday celebration video for Bai Ingchong involving many celebrities stirred social media. Bai Ingchong, the second son of one of the 4 powerful families in northern Myanmar, is also the founder of electronic fraud organizations. In the video, the most prominent figure is Sang Chi Wai, sending birthday wishes of happy birthday, success and everything to Bai. Since entering the entertainment industry, Sang has been surrounded by scandals. Beyond the bullying of actress Lam Kai-yi, he's been named in the 2001 assault case, the Vacha banned substance party incident, and the controversies surrounding the film The Warlords. Despite facing numerous scandals, Chang's career remains unscathed. Veteran Hong Kong actor Alan Tam once described him as the man who never falls in the entertainment industry, and he's known among peers as the boss. Today, we'll explore the mysteries behind his success. And you're watching True Crime in the World, where we delve into the most mysterious cases, the most thrilling stories. And as usual, before we start unraveling the mysteries of today's case, please leave a like, a subscribe to support us. Thank you very much. Eric Tsang was born on April 14, 1953, in Hong Kong into a wealthy family. His father, Tsang Kai-wing, was a senior police officer and coach of the police football team. Influenced by his father, Tsang loved football from a young age and joined the Hong Kong youth team after graduation. However, at only 1.59 meters tall, his football career wasn't particularly notable. During this time, he met Sammo Hung, a martial arts actor, and from there, he entered the entertainment industry. In 1972, he got his first role in the Shaw Brothers film The 14 Amazons. He then moved to Taiwan for 2 years to work on films before returning to Hong Kong in 1976 to pursue his career further. By the late 1970s, as traditional martial arts films began to wane, Tsang shifted to behind-the-scenes work. By accumulating numerous connections, he joined Cinema City and Films Company in 1980 alongside other famous figures, quickly making the company a powerhouse in Hong Kong cinema. With his cheerful personality and broad knowledge, Tsang contributed significantly to the company's comedy films. In 1981, he starred in the comedy Chasing Girls, and by 1982, he directed Best Partner, which broke box office records in Hong Kong. In 1987, he challenged himself with a role in the gangster film Last Victory, and was highly praised by critics. Films like Double City Story, 1991, and Comrades, Almost a Love Story, 1996, earned him Best Actor and Best Supporting Actor awards at the Hong Kong Film Awards. Chang's acting career was quite smooth, and he also tried his hand at hosting. In 1990, he co-hosted the comedy show Happy Trendsetters with Lydia Shum, becoming a legend. In 1992, with support from stars like Alan Tam and Anita Mui, Tsang joined TVB, becoming the golden MC by consistently hosting major events like Miss Hong Kong and the Hong Kong Film Awards. Although he appeared humorous, he was actually very smart. In 1991, when New Art City dissolved due to conflicts of interest, Tsang founded his own film companies like Good Friends, Children's City, and UFO Film People. He produced popular films like The Dusty Three Nights and Golden Branches and Jade Leaves. In 2000, he, along with close friends Alan Tam and Nat Chan, established Oriental Charm, attracting many artists to collaborate. By 2017, after ending his 25-year acting contract with TVB, he quickly rose from deputy director to general manager, overseeing TVB's main content. From a supporting actor, Tsang ascended to the manager of TVB, a rare journey in the entertainment world. However, he's also famous for a series of contentious dramas. One of these was the 2001 assault at the Island Green Club in Hong Kong, where Tsang was attacked by 3 men, resulting in him needing 29 stitches. The cause was speculated to be personal friction, and Tsang denied rumors linking it to romantic disputes or drunken brawls. There were rumors that the incident was related to competition between his Oriental Charm Group and the Emperor Entertainment Group. The tension escalated when Oriental Charm, lacking funds, sought investment from Emperor but couldn't reach an agreement. Later, when Oriental Charm wanted to borrow actor Nicholas Tsay from Emperor, they were asked to include Joey Young in the film, leading to deeper conflicts. At Anita Mua's birthday party in 2000, Tsang insulted Jimmy Wong, the owner of Emperor Entertainment Group, with vulgar language further straining their relationship. However, this wasn't the first time. In 1992, during the Happy Trendsetters show, Tsang publicly stated that actors Wong Yuan-fan and Lo Kar-leung were a fake couple. In 1997, at a party, he openly teased Aaron Kwok about always thinking about chasing girls. In 2012, Tsang was once again embroiled in controversy after assaulting someone. That October, the wife of singer hauntingly, Emily Lowe, went to a restaurant to celebrate a friend's birthday and complained about excessive charges. The restaurant owner was Wong Ho, husband of former Miss Hong Kong, Joyce Godenzi. A month later, on November 22nd, Wang Ho revealed he was being extorted for 200,000 Hong Kong dollars with threats to leak a video of celebrities using banned substances. Wang Ho said he had seen the video, which involved 5 stars, for female and 1 male, at a VIP room in his restaurant. The leaked video was recorded by a former employee using a security camera. On December 5th, Wang Ho and his wife attended the wedding of former Miss Hong Kong and Hung at the Marriott Hotel in Tuen Mun, Gold Coast. Sang was also present. Known for his drinking, Sang was often drunk at friends' birthday or wedding parties, needing assistance to leave. That night was no exception. Upon leaving, Wang Ho reported to the police that he was slapped by Sang at the wedding and needed medical attention. The police began investigating the incident. There were 2 reasons proposed for Chang's slap. 1, he was displeased with how Wang Ho handled the video issue, feeling it shouldn't have been done that way. Sang, seen as a big brother in Hong Kong's entertainment, believed many in the industry thought Wang Ho liked to create drama for publicity. Sang felt responsible to address the issue. The second reason was that Sang suspected the video might be a self-promotion stunt, and when he confronted Wang Ho, he lost his temper and struck him. That day, Sang went to the police station with his friend, Michael Mew, to deny the assault. Mew also stated he didn't see anyone hit anyone that night. On December 7th, Emily Low and her husband, Hacken Lee, held a press conference stating they had never used banned substances and were ready to show photos from the party to prove it. On the same day, Wang Ho changed his statement, declaring he had never seen the video or been extorted. The case began to take a turn as artists started publicly criticizing Wang Ho. On December 12th, Emily Low, Gigi Lai, and other artists, along with their lawyers, held a press conference announcing they had sent a letter demanding Wang Ho retract his false statements within 48 hours. On December 13th, Sang Chi-wai stated in an interview that the image of artists is crucial as it affects the products they endorse. However, on December 19th, Sang was arrested by the police on suspicion of assault and intimidation, but was later released on bail. Some media speculated that Wang Ho had a formidable background, linked not only to underworld figures but also protected by high-ranking police officers. On the same day, Wang Ho's restaurant issued a statement claiming the banned substance party was a defamation and that the artist's accusations of overcharging were entirely false. Notably, the video Wang Ho had mentioned was never leaked, and no artists were investigated for this incident. Thus, the banned substance party event sparked much controversy, but the dramas surrounding Sang Chi-wai did not cease. In December 2013, Hong Kong actress Lam Kai revealed she had been harassed by 2 big brothers in the film industry. In the first publicly released video, the names were blurred, but 15 years later, Chinese journalist Zhu Wei released an unblurred video naming one of the on January 11, 2018, Han Hua, known as the godmother of models, posted an article revealing that Sang had repeatedly abused female artists and engaged in other negative behaviors. Journalists discovered that since 1990, when Sang participated in the film The Warlords, he had used filming scenes to harass actress Yu Shanshan. In the film, there was a scene where Yu Shanshan was humiliated by a male actor. Sang suggested she remove her clothes for a more realistic performance. During the shoot, he took advantage to turn the fake into real. Yu Shanshan screamed in protest, calling for help multiple times, but the crew thought it was part of the acting and didn't intervene immediately. Only later did they stop Sang. After this incident, Yu Shanshan left the industry. An art director in the crew was also furious and publicly criticized Sang for his lack of humanity. Ultimately, citing that the scene's effect was not up to standard, Sang did not use that footage. In 2019, during an interview with Li Yuanhua, Sang defended himself by saying, "I asked her to act realistically to achieve the best effect for the film." Yu Shanshan also agreed. Sang has been linked with numerous romantic rumors over the years. In 1972, he married Wang Meihua, with whom he had 2 daughters, Sang Boi and Sang Wingi. Wang's family was quite poor. She started singing at 12 and signed with a dance troupe at 14, marrying Sang at 18, then retiring to become a housewife. At that time, Sang was just starting in the entertainment industry as a stuntman. Even on their wedding night, he had to work. In the 3 years following their marriage, Sang rarely stayed home except for festivals, New Year, or his parents' birthdays. Wang Meihua barely saw her husband. Despite this, she endured. But Sang was continuously embroiled in love scandals with various actresses. Some even called Wang to challenge her. In 1975, Wang decided to divorce. In 1978, Sang remarried a non-industry woman named Chu Kum Chun, with whom he had 2 sons, Sang Kwok Chung and Sang Kwok Yuk. However, their relationship was not close, leading Chu to move with their sons to Canada. They lived separately for over 20 years. In early 2020, Chu returned to Hong Kong for medical treatment and passed away in August of that year from cancer. On September 30, 2022, Sang appeared at a birthday party for Malaysian model Lebra. After singing birthday wishes, he went up to her and kissed her on the lips, which quickly drew criticism from netizens, many calling him a pervert. Sang responded by saying it was just a birthday kiss and an act of courtesy. In 2023, Sang was involved in another controversy when he appeared in a birthday video for Bai Ingchong, wishing him. This led to suspicions about his connections with Myanmar's powers. Sang immediately denied any relationship, stating he only made the video at the request of a friend from the mainland and did not know Bai Ingchong. In June 2024, Sang attended the opening of a new store by the livestream superstar, Crazy Little Young Brother. Here, he took a photo with internet celebrity Chow Mei. Netizens criticized him for looking at Chow Mei's chest, though some argued his gaze was fleeting, only lasting less than a second before he looked back at the camera, and his height only reached Chow Mei's shoulders, making it unintentional. During this year's Mid-Autumn Festival, Sang joined Crazy Little Young Brother in a live stream for the Three Sheeps group to promote Meichung mooncakes. Crazy Little Young Brother claimed Meichung was a major Hong Kong brand with affordable prices. However, some customers found out that these mooncakes were manufactured in Guangdong, not Hong Kong. Sang locked his Douyin account that night and deleted all related information about the Three Sheeps. However, on the afternoon of September 4th, he posted a photo with the group on social media with the caption, "We're all good." In the entertainment industry, we understand that truth and falsehood often intertwine, making it hard to distinguish right from wrong. But when someone is surrounded by so much negative gossip, even if untrue, it inevitably affects their career. Yet over the years, Sang Chiwai's position as the number 1 in the entertainment circle has seemed unshaken, leading one to wonder if he has a powerful backing behind him. Going back to 1976, Sang Chiwai's family experienced a major upheaval involving his father, Sang Kai-wing. Sang Kai-wing joined the Hong Kong police force in 1940, and by the 1970s had risen to the rank of police station commander. At that time, there were 4 famous detective chiefs in the Hong Kong police, Lu Lok, Yen Hung Lon Kong, and Han Sum. Among them, Lu Lok was most influential, manipulating both the legal and underworld spheres with his formidable power. Sang Kai-wing was under Lu Lok's command and held a very high position. The movie Infernal Affairs was inspired by the real-life story of the alliance between the Hong Kong police and gangs in the 60s and 70s, where the character Lei Lok, played by Andy Lau, was based on Lu Lok. Lu Lok had unified the Hong Kong gangs, creating a massive corruption empire, consolidating political and criminal worlds for mutual benefit, drawing over 95% of the police into the corruption network. This wave of corruption spread across all sectors of the city, amassing enormous wealth for Lu Lok. Sang Kai-wing was a key ally of Lu Lok, reaping significant financial and reputational benefits. For Sang Chi-wai, his first marriage to Wang Meihua was a significant milestone. In a later interview, Wang Meihua revealed that when they married, outsiders said she had married into one of Hong Kong's elite families. Their wedding had over 100 tables and attracted numerous celebrities. At just 18, she entered a marriage without any romantic proposal, only a family that society deemed wealthy. She recounted that on their wedding day, her arms were so laden with gold bracelets that she had to stoop to pick up those that fell with each step. In 1971, the corruption within the Hong Kong police was upended when Malcolm McLehose, a British diplomat, became the 25th governor of Hong Kong. Malcolm discovered that Hong Kong society was riddled with corruption, leading him to establish the Independent Commission Against Corruption in 1974 to investigate and prosecute corruption, preventing misconduct in government and public services. Lu Lok and his associates were investigated by the ICAC, and Sang Kai-wing was also ensnared by the law. In 1975, Sang Kai-wing was arrested for corruption. He pleaded guilty and agreed to surrender assets worth 400,000 Hong Kong dollars. Initially, he was sentenced to 1 year in prison with a suspended sentence. However, the Attorney General, dissatisfied with the leniency of the sentence, appealed to the Supreme Court, which then increased the sentence to 3 years imprisonment and confiscated all of Sang Kai-wing's assets. Before the sentence took effect, Sang Kai-wing quickly sold most of his properties in Hong Kong and fled to Taiwan, prompting the ICAC to issue a warrant for his arrest. After living in seclusion for 9 years, he passed away in 2011. In Hong Kong, Sang Kai-wing owned 5 apartments and 3 parking spaces, but had sold 4 apartments and 2 parking spaces before the government's asset freeze took effect, leaving the state with little to recover. As for Sang Chi-wai, although his father had moved abroad, family connections remained in Hong Kong. When young, Sang Kai-wing had worked and played football with the father of the famous singer Alan Tam. Thus the families were very close. Later, Sang Chi-wai and Alan Tam became good friends. Additionally, Sang Kai-wing was the uncle of former Hong Kong Secretary for Commerce and Economic Development, Ma Sik-ching, and the uncle of TVB's Deputy General Manager, Sang Lai-chun. However, it's unclear if these relationships helped Sang Chi-wai in his career. Perhaps due to growing up with his father's way of dealing with people, Sang Chi-wai excels in social interactions. Besides his work in film and television, he has invested in various other industries, particularly in the culinary field, with restaurants ranging from casual to upscale. In 2018, he opened a restaurant in Kowloon, inviting only industry friends for a trial, creating a very discreet business atmosphere. He used this restaurant to host gatherings with fellow artists. Sang is passionate about football, being an active member of the artist's football team, enjoys horse racing with several famous racehorses to his name, and is an avid golfer who founded the Hong Kong Chinese Amateur Golf Association and served as its president. These activities helped him expand his network among many well-known and influential figures in society. In the entertainment industry, Sang is an elder brother who is always eager to help the next generation. Many stars, both in front of and behind the camera, have received his support. For example, director An Hui spent 5 years as a film producer without much success until Sang Chi-wai's support allowed her to transition to directing, achieving success with the film Double City Story. Wong Cho-lam graduated from the Hong Kong Academy for Performing Arts in 2003 and joined TVB, but was underutilized due to his looks, relegated to writing for children's shows and playing minor roles. In 2008, when Sang noticed him, they co-hosted the Academy Awards together, and from then on, Column's fame grew. Cho-lam once said, "Without Eric Sang, there would be no me today." For Sang Chi-wai's 60th birthday, TVB spent over 11.62 million new Taiwan dollars to organize a grand birthday party. The event was like a major awards ceremony, hosted by famous artists, with the presence of the 4 heavenly kings and over 700 celebrities. Even the Hong Kong Film Awards had to be postponed to make way for this event. However, how much of this was due to social connections and how much was due to Chang's personal charisma is hard to quantify. Story 3. On April 5, 1980, it was a beautiful sunny Saturday. In preparation for the Easter ceremony the following day, the nuns at the Charity Hospital Church in Toledo, Ohio, USA had started early. At 8:20 a.m., after finishing her morning prayer, Sister Madeline intended to go to the sacristy to discuss the details of the evening ceremony with Father Gerald. However, upon reaching the sacristy door, she found it locked. This puzzled Madeline, as during the busiest times at the church, the sacristy was never locked. When Madeline used her key to unlock the door and stepped into the dimly lit room, a horrifying scene unfolded before her. The oldest nun in the church, Sister Margaret, lay motionless on the floor, completely nude. Years later, whenever Madeline recalled that scene, she still shivered. At the time, Sister Margaret was in a bizarre position. Arms spread wide, limbs unnaturally stiff, eyes bloodshot, and her body wrapped in a white altar cloth. The most terrifying aspect was that beneath her body someone had placed a crucifix. This scene easily evoked images of a satanic ritual, and happening within a church made it spine-chilling. In reality, unlike the cases we usually hear about, this one was solved with astonishing speed. So fast in fact that before the police even arrived at the scene, or more precisely, just minutes after the victim was discovered, the perpetrator was apprehended. Now, let's unravel the details of this case. Sister Margaret, whose real name was Margaret and Paul, was born in a small village in Aridin, Ecuador. Her father was a carpenter with a modest income, supporting a family of 8 children, which made life very challenging. Both her parents were devout Catholics, and her two older sisters had joined the local charitable nunnery. Perhaps influenced by this, Margaret had from a young age aspired to become a nun, determined to remain unmarried for life. In her youth, Margaret excelled academically, and through her efforts, she earned a master's degree in literature from De Salles University. After graduation, she also obtained a nursing certification and worked at the local church hospital. By 1971, at the age of 62, Margaret was at retirement age. However, due to her outstanding contributions over the years, the church hospital where she worked earnestly asked her to stay on as the church manager. According to those who worked with her, Sister Margaret was very kind and gentle. If there was one flaw to point out, it was that she was overly strict about traditional customs. For every ritual in the church, she demanded precision down to the smallest detail. Initially, this wasn't a significant issue, as the church's primary function was to conduct these ceremonies, and strict adherence was not blameworthy. However, things began to change when Father Gerald Robinson started working at the church. Gerald was 30 years younger than Margaret, and his tenure at the church was exactly 30 years shorter. Despite this, having graduated from a regular seminary, Gerald held a higher position than Margaret. Faced with Sister Margaret's daily reminders, Gerald grew increasingly irritated and impatient. Taking advantage of Margaret's advanced age, which had diminished her hearing and memory, Father Gerald often scolded her loudly and gave her harsh orders, deeply hurting Sister Margaret. On April 4, 1980, the day before the incident, Father Gerald ended the Mass early without consulting anyone, which infuriated Sister Margaret. After the service, she immediately confronted Gerald to question his actions. Perhaps feeling guilty, Gerald remained silent throughout the conversation, only giving Margaret a cold stare before turning away without a word. Although this time Gerald didn't raise his voice as he had before, according to Shirley, the church's janitorial manager, Margaret was very sad that night. She tugged at Shirley's arm, crying, asking, why did he cut the Mass short? In reality, Margaret and Shirley weren't close, they rarely talked. However, seeing Margaret's distress, Shirley couldn't help but tear up. Not knowing how to comfort the nun, Shirley could only silently accompany Margaret as she left in sorrow. On the day of the incident, although Margaret seemed mentally foggy and disappointed, outwardly, nothing appeared unusual. She maintained her usual routine, waking up at 5:30 a.m., donning her traditional nun's habit, and leaving her residence. Around 6 a.m., someone saw her in the church's dining area, exchanging a few words. It was also Margaret's 72nd birthday, but she seemed uninterested in celebrating. Her breakfast was a simple bowl of oatmeal, with raisins and a cup of coffee, which she ate hastily before heading to the church. It was now 6:50 a.m., just half an hour before she was found dead. At 7:30 a.m. that morning, someone heard hurried footsteps from the second floor of the church. The steps were heavy, and according to gatekeeper Wardell Langston, they sounded as if something serious was happening. Subsequently, based on the descriptions from several nuns, the footsteps originated from the direction of Father Gerald's bedroom. Someone was rushing along the western corridor with a sense of urgency, causing unease. Not long after, Sister Margaret was found lifeless in the sacristy. As the primary suspect in this case, Father Gerald naturally became the central focus of the police investigation. Upon searching his room, the police found a letter opener with dark red stains that matched the crime scene exactly. Therefore, just days later, Gerald was arrested on suspicion of being the murderer. However, in response to the accusations, Gerald completely denied any involvement. He even fabricated a story that after the incident, someone had come to the church's confessional and confessed to attacking Sister Margaret. But when the police asked him to describe the features of the confessor, Gerald faltered and eventually admitted that he had made up the story People might have thought that at this point, Gerald would have to admit his guilt. But in reality, as the case neared its conclusion, a series of unexpected events unfolded. Gerald was born into a Polish immigrant family, and within the immigrant community in the U.S. at that time, Poles were known for their religious devotion. Thus, Father Gerald held a high reputation within the local Polish community. After the incident, this community was outraged, and many rallied to defend him. Moreover, Toledo, the city where the event took place, had an extremely strong religious atmosphere. A significant portion of the law enforcement community were also devout believers. For instance, Deputy Police Chief Witt, who was in charge of the investigation, believed Gerald was innocent for a simple reason. Father Gerald was chosen by God, recognized by the Pope, and thus could not possibly commit such a crime. More importantly, at that time, there was an unwritten rule in the U.S. criminal justice system. If a priest was arrested on suspicion of a crime, the police were not allowed to proceed with standard law enforcement procedures, but had to notify the local bishop to handle it according to canon law. This might sound unbelievable, but despite quickly gathering sufficient evidence, Deputy Chief would order a halt to all proceedings and the retrieval of related files. Shortly after, the Archbishop of the Toledo Diocese, Jerome Schmidt, personally came to the police station and took Gerald away. A police officer named Bill, feeling indignant about this action, asked the accompanying priests where they intended to take the suspect, and received the reply, "We are taking him to a mental hospital." But from that point on, Bill never saw Gerald again. So, was Gerald actually committed to a mental institution? The answer, of course, is no. According to information released by the diocese, after the incident, Gerald was demoted from his church position, but he remained part of the local diocese's staff. After a few years living within the Polish community, he was eventually appointed as a part-time priest at a private nursing home. Years later, Officer Bill learned that on the day of the incident, Deputy Chief Wood had personally picked up the Archbishop, even bringing along a professional lawyer to deal with the police. In an interview, Bill expressed his frustration. "I don't understand why he would protect a criminal. This has caused a lot of dissatisfaction among us. If a priest just committed a minor offense like running a red light, maybe you could look the other way, but this is a murder case." Although Bill's outrage went unanswered, the real hidden aspects of the case were slowly coming to light. At this point, one might think this case stemmed from personal conflict. However, there remains an unresolved question. Why did Gerald use a ritual that was blasphemous to attack Margaret? And after committing such a heinous act, why did the diocese still try to protect him? It's important to note that Gerald belonged to the Roman Catholic Church, an institution known for its intolerance towards heresy. Since the Middle Ages, clergy have hunted witches, a practice that continued for centuries. Was this case really as simple as it seemed? First, we must understand that Gerald's actions towards Margaret were not merely an act of disrespect. In reality, it was a ritual known as the Black Massachusetts. According to esoteric spirituality, this ritual is performed by devotees of Satan in search of supernatural power. These individuals believe that Satan from the Bible is real and present in the world. To please Satan, they conduct sacrificial rites using animals, women, or children. In the Black Mass, women are considered the altar. The crucifix of Jesus becomes the sacrificial object, and the person conducting the ritual performs unimaginable acts on the altar to conclude the ceremony. Listening to this might horrify many, but in reality, among the crimes committed by Satan worshippers, the Black Mass is just the tip of the iceberg. At the end of the 1980s, when crimes involving priests surged across the United States, an organization called the Survivors Network of Those Abused by Priests was formed. One of its members, living in Toledo, Sister Anna Louise, aged 29, publicly spoke about her sufferings from a young age at the hands of local clergy. Anna recounted how, when she was very young, she was often surrounded by people in strange liturgical garments. Once, she was taken to a remote cemetery, where a priest in a black cloak locked her in a coffin filled with various insects, claiming they would turn her into a demon of Satan. After the ritual ended, another priest carried her to a table and performed inhumane acts, while those around sang hymns in praise of Satan. Although much of Anna's childhood memory was dim, as she grew older, she began to understand more clearly what she had gone through. However, by this time, she and her family were entirely entangled in an organization named Dark Reincarnation, and one of its key members was Father Gerald. In 2003, after Anna publicly accused those responsible for her ordeal, the long-forgotten case of Sister Margaret was brought back into the light. Notably, when the police investigated information from Anna Louise, although she knew nothing about Margaret's case, she inadvertently posed a poignant question. Were the wounds on the victim's body, or rather, on Sister Margaret's body, arranged in the shape of an inverted cross? The police had no clear answer to this question, so they examined the altar cloth that had been wrapped around Margaret at the time. The result was startling. They found 18 perfectly symmetrical cuts on the cloth, connecting to form an inverted cross. In April 2004, Gerald was officially arrested, and the police searched his residence. What they found left everyone in shock. In Gerald's bedroom, there there were hundreds of photographs of various victims. Most of these were taken years ago, but one was taken within the last year. This suggested that behind Gerald was a massive satanic organization, and Margaret was clearly not the only victim. However, before the police could proceed further, an event similar to 1 year before occurred again. After Gerald's arrest, the local diocese pressured the police, and the Polish community in Toledo organized large-scale protests, demanding the release of their priest. Despite the police asserting that all arrest procedures were legal, the parishioners continued to cause disturbances. Eventually, with bail money contributed by countless supporters, Gerald was released once more. This event immediately caused a stir across the United States. However, once the horrific secrets were exposed, concealing them was no longer easy. To strengthen the case against Gerald, the police not only exhumed Sister Margaret's remains, but also invited forensic expert Henry Lee to recreate the crime scene. Through analyzing the original files, Dr. Lee concluded that around 7 a.m. on the day of the incident, Gerald had snuck into the sacristy before Sister Margaret. Passing by the church altar, he grabbed a tablecloth. Taking advantage of Margaret's morning prayer, he attacked her from behind, using the tablecloth to strangle her until she stopped breathing. According to Dr. Lee, during the entire assault, the victim did not resist, likely due to her advanced age and lack of strength. On April 24, 2006, after thorough preparation and ensuring all aspects were carefully considered, Gerald's trial officially began. On that day, all the chapel staff from the Toledo Charity Hospital were present, including Officer Bill, who had investigated the case. Gerald's defense was equally well attended, including supporters from the diocese, the Polish community, and even police officers who had concealed his actions when the crime occurred. During the trial, despite the best efforts of Gerald's lawyers, the truth could not be distorted. Faced with an overwhelming amount of undeniable evidence presented by the police, Gerald's side was forced to make continuous concessions. As the trial neared its end with no other options, the defense could only question the motive behind the crime. They argued that Gerald, a priest with a stable income and a certain social status, had no reason to commit such an act, suggesting that the police were biased from the start. However, the prosecution had prepared for this defense. In court, 3 witnesses testified that they had seen the priest near the chapel around the time of the incident. The prosecution then presented 3 reasons for Gerald's heinous act. First, the deep-seated conflict between Gerald and Sister Margaret was irreconcilable. Second, Gerald harbored resentment for not being promoted to cardinal, leading to prolonged despondency. Third, just before the crime, he felt utterly hopeless about everyone involved in the Mass, including those present at the trial. This was why he disregarded Sister Margaret's objections to shorten the service and resorted to such sinful means to release his long-suppressed emotions. Gerald believed he had suffered enough and did not want to endure any longer. As the prosecutor finished speaking, the courtroom fell into silence. Perhaps it was at this moment that the Polish community backing Gerald realized for the first time how despised they were in the eyes of the spiritual leader they revered. Finally, on May 11, 2006, the jury unanimously convicted Gerald of murder, sentencing him to 15 years in prison. When the judge's gavel fell, signaling the verdict, Gerald, who had maintained a cold demeanor throughout, suddenly revealed a look of despair. Later, media circulated footage of Gerald being escorted by police. In the video, he bowed his head, tears streaming down his face, muttering, "Jesus, sister, please don't find me. Please don't find me." It turned out even devils could feel fear. Regrettably, although the case was solved, many dark corners behind it remain unanswered. What organization was behind Gerald? Who were the members of this organization? How many victims were there? To this day, these questions still lack precise answers. This was the second case in U.S. history where a Catholic priest was convicted of murder. Before this, Father Hans Schmidt was executed in 1916, marking the first time a church member faced capital punishment for such a crime. In May 2014, Gerald Robinson suffered a severe heart attack. He was then transferred to the end-of-life care unit at Franklin Medical Center, a facility managed by the Ohio Department of Rehabilitation and Correction in Columbus, Ohio. There on July 4, 2014, Gerald breathed his last, closing a life full of controversy and sin. And so, today's case comes to a close here. Story 4. In the 90s, when discussing martial arts stars alongside Jackie Chan, Jet Li was another name everyone knew. Jet Li was adored for his attractive appearance, his masculine and strong presence, and his fluid, precise, and visually stunning martial arts techniques. To date, after over 30 years of acting, the King of Kung Fu has pocketed more than 60 classic martial arts films, where he was the lead. While admired for his acting roles as a husband and father, Jet Li has disappointed his fans with how he treated his wives and children in his 2 marriages. Why is that? What drove this man to abandon his first wife and 2 young children for a new love? Jet Li was born on April the 26th, 1963, into an ordinary working-class family in Beijing. His father was a worker and his mother was a bus ticket seller. When Jet Li was just 2, his father passed away due to a work accident in Shanghai. From then on, his mother, Mrs. Li, became the sole pillar and support for her 5 children to grow up. The sudden departure of his father caused Jet Li to develop an independent character from a young age. At 8, he was fortunate enough to catch the eye of a martial arts coach and was then sent to study at a sports school in Beijing. This marked the official beginning of his martial arts career, turning a page in the life of young Jet Li. Throughout his 10 years of martial arts training, Jet Li was always at the top of every major and minor martial arts competition within China. At this point, he even frequently traveled to North America, South America, Africa, Europe, Southeast Asia, and more to perform kung fu. Beyond his outstanding talent and relentless effort, this brilliant success cannot be discussed without acknowledging the contributions of Huang Chuyan, his senior at the martial arts school. 2 years older than Jet Li, Huang Chuyan came from a much better family background than the boy who had lost his father. She was born into a family with an artistic tradition. Her father, Wang Bashi, was the director of the Beijing Military Arts Troupe. Her mother, Chen Xiangwan, was a dance teacher at the Beijing Opera and Dance Theater. Despite the vastly different circumstances of their families, Huang Chuyan always cared for and looked after her junior. After many years together at the martial arts school, their relationship grew deeper. At that time, Huang Chuyan was very straightforward, clearly expressing her affection for the younger student. Meanwhile, young Jet Li was still naive in matters of the heart, only feeling that she was very kind to him. So they became a couple. In 1980, with his superior martial arts skills and handsome appearance, Li was quickly chosen by directors for the film Shaolin Temple. By 1982, when the movie was released, it immediately created a significant impact. At that time, despite movie tickets being extremely cheap, Shaolin Temple reportedly earned up to 140 million renminbi at the box office. The film was not only screened in Hong Kong, but also shattered box offices in many Asian countries, Australia, and several American nations. Shaolin Temple truly sparked a global craze. Jet Li never expected that success would come so swiftly upon entering the entertainment industry. Therefore, he decided to focus entirely on his film career. At this point, Jet Li had intentions of breaking up with Huang Chuyan. However, after reconsideration, he realized that ending their relationship right after becoming famous would not only hurt her, but might also lead fans to think he was unfaithful. Jet Li quickly abandoned that thought, and even introduced his girlfriend to the director, hoping she would become the female lead in the film The Little Shaolin Monk. However, once a man decides to break up, a woman's sixth sense will surely pick up on it, especially since Jet Li and Huang Chuyan were childhood sweethearts, spending every day together for over 10 years. Huang Chuyan always treated Jet Li with unwavering consistency. Once, when Jet Li broke his leg while filming, Chuyan was the one who visited him daily in the hospital to take care of him. In 1986, Jet Li took on both the role of director and lead actor for the first time in the film Born to Defense. However, during the filming process, he contracted a mysterious illness. Despite consulting many doctors, there was no improvement until he was treated by a mysterious master named Zhao Zhongxue from Guizhou, after which his condition started to improve. Strangely, this master was not a renowned doctor and had no formal medical training. According to rumors at the time, there were many in China claiming to possess supernatural abilities, backed by even high-ranking officials. Zhao Zhongxue was one such person. More astonishing was that Zhao's bizarre treatment methods actually saved Jet Li's life. On the first day, Zhao rubbed Jet Li's back a few times, and the movie star immediately felt invigorated. On the second day, using the same method, Zhao Zhongxue made Jet Li vomit blood. After several such sessions, even Jet Li's stomach pain was cured. Grateful for saving his life, and in awe of Zhao Zhongshue's supernatural abilities, Jet Li took her as his foster mother. Thereafter, whenever he couldn't make a decision, he would run to her for advice. As time passed, Jet Li's status in the entertainment industry continued to rise. Many directors and film companies in Hong Kong were eager to collaborate with him. The actor would write down the names of these companies on paper and ask his foster mother to choose for him. Zhao Zhongxue circled the name Golden Harvest. Before this, Zhao Zhongxue had told Jet Li before the age of 30, "You will have billions in assets." And that's exactly what happened. After joining Golden Harvest, his acting career took off like a kite in the wind. At the peak of his career, Jet Li decided to marry Huang Qiuyang. According to rumors, this decision was also influenced by Zhao Zhongxue. His foster mother had advised Jet Li, "If you marry early, it will benefit your career. Huang Qiuyang has the luck of love. Surely it will be good for your health and development." In June 1987, Jet Li and Huang Qiuyang quietly registered their marriage without a wedding or visiting each other's parents, which was quite contrary to Chinese customs. Unexpectedly, Zhao Zhongxue was later sentenced to 2 years in prison for fraud and practicing superstition. After marriage, Huang Qiuyang followed her husband to Shenzhen, where they established an international martial arts development company. However, the business did not meet expectations, surviving only 1 year before going bankrupt. In 1988, both became martial arts researchers and emigrated to the United States. Their first daughter, Li Si, was born during this time. To be a good wife and mother, Huang Qiuyang turned down roles in films like The 13 Women of Nanyang and Journey to the West, dedicating her time to caring for her husband and child at home. Meanwhile, after his business venture failed, Jet Li focused on research, deciding to stay in the US to promote Chinese martial arts. But opportunities always come unexpectedly. In 1989, their second daughter, Li Dai, was born. Jet Li also received an offer from the film crew of The Master. Huang Qiuyang fully supported and encouraged her husband to seize this opportunity. She couldn't have known that this film would also mark the end of their brief marriage. A marriage not based on mutual love from both sides, how could it last happily? When Nina Li Qi appeared, Jet Li was ready to bear the infamy of abandoning his wife and children, decisively divorcing Huang Qiuyang to be with his new love. Nina Li Qi was born in 1961 in Jiangmen, Guangdong, and grew up in Shanghai. She studied economics as an international student at San Francisco University, USA. In 1986, Nina won the first runner-up title at the Miss Asia pageant held in Hong Kong, quickly stepping into the entertainment industry. Once an icon of seductive beauty, Nina was adored by many. She had been the mistress of casino tycoon Stanley Ho, and later she became Jet Li's wife. Perhaps in Jet Li's eyes, Huang Qiuyang and Nina Li Qi were entirely different. One was from a martial arts background, but willing to give up her career to wholeheartedly care for the family. The other was a beauty queen, returned from abroad, fluent in English and knowledgeable in economics. Jet Li quickly felt a strong connection with Nina. Whether it was life reflections or interests, they understood each other very well. In one interview, the Kung Fu King once spoke about his second wife. "I can give up benefits or fame for would do anything for her. I love Nina." After meeting Nina on the set of The Master, Jet Li immediately called the USA, asking for a divorce from his then-wife, Huang Qiuyang. "I'm sorry, I was wrong to marry you. I found my true love." On the other end of the line, Huang Qiuyang couldn't believe what she was hearing from her husband. It turned out her sacrifices and support had become the end of their 3-year marriage. She pleaded for him not to rush into the decision, to wait until their daughters were a bit older. However, neither Li Qi nor Li Dai could change Jet Li's decision. He was extremely decisive in wanting to immediately be with the beautiful woman, saying divorce was inevitable. In 1991, the marriage between Jet Li and Huang Qiuyang officially ended. This news quickly covered all newspapers and magazines at the time. Jet Li had abandoned his wife and children, leaving his ex-wife and 2 daughters to deal with the debts they had taken on to buy property in the U.S. As a full-time housewife, Huang Qiuyang had no means to pay off the debts. Quickly, their assets were seized by the bank. For days, she and the children wandered the streets. Fortunately, a kind-hearted woman took them in, letting them stay in a windowless basement with no sunlight. Her ex-husband's abandonment felt like a cruel jest. Huang Qiuyang had to work hard to make money, leaving her little time to care for her children. In desperation, she sent her daughters to live with Jet Li's mother in Beijing, and then studied at the Hong Kong Academy for Performing Arts. Some time later, Qiuyang also found work in the U.S. Her modest salary allowed her to support herself independently, without relying on anyone. After a failed marriage, Huang Qiuyang became very cautious with matters of the she didn't accept a new relationship until she met Mr. Wang, the owner of a restaurant in San Francisco. With his passionate pursuit, Huang Qiuyang finally opened her heart to accept his kindness and sincerity. She believed in marriage once more. Leaving his ex-wife and 2 daughters behind, Jet Li became a single man again. Do you believe in love promises? Jet Li and Nina Li Qi had made a romantic 10-year promise. Nina said, "If in 10 years you still love me like this, let's be together." And indeed, Jet Li's love for Nina grew deeper over those 10 years. Throughout that time, he truly devoted his entire heart to Nina. In 1992, Nina Li Qi's investments failed, leaving her with debts amounting to tens of millions of RMB. Jet Li signed a contract to essentially sell himself to a company, agreeing to complete 6 films in 3 years, for which he received 72 million renminbi, and he handed over the entire sum to Nina to pay off her debts. In 1996, Jet Li starred in the film Dr. Y in the Scripture with No Words, sharing many romantic scenes with actress Angie Chu. Numerous dating rumors emerged. Jealous, Nina threatened to break up with Jet Li. The actor then chased after her all the way to the airport to express his feelings, ultimately changing her mind. After this incident, Jet Li rarely had rumors linked to the films he was involved in. 1999 was the final year of their 10-year agreement. Jet Li and Nina Li Qi held their wedding in Los Angeles, USA. Jet Li even invited his biological daughter, Li Si, and his 2 sisters to attend. But of course, Li Si refused, as no one wants to attend their father's wedding to another woman. At this time, both love and career were as Jet Li wished. After marriage, they had 2 daughters, and as promised, Jet Li handed over all his earnings to his wife for management. They started businesses, invested, and made a lot of money. Currently, Jet Li's new family life is very happy. But what about Li Si and Li Dai, the 2 unfortunate children left by both parents? Growing up, Li Si gradually understood the story of her parents and came to deeply resent Jet Li. She once said, "I'd rather not have a father like that." In 2000, the second year after his second marriage, Jet Li's mother passed away from illness. He rushed back to Beijing. Upon arriving home, he was met with the sight of his daughters, Li Si and Li Dai, kneeling on the ground, crying heart-wrenchingly. Moved by pity, Jet Li proposed bringing them to Hong Kong. Nina also promised to take care of his children from his previous marriage. However, in Li Si's eyes, there was nothing but hatred for her father and the woman who had destroyed their family. She pulled her sister behind her, telling them to leave, that she would never go with them. Jet Li truly had no other choice. When Jet Li and Nina's daughters were born, Li Si's resentment deepened. While she and her sister attended boarding school, never receiving warm love from their father, Nina's daughters received daily care and protection. And in Jet Li's eyes, perhaps only his daughters from his second marriage existed. At that time, Jet Li had both money and time. He frequently took his new family to various events and didn't miss any significant milestones in his young daughter's growth. These children also received the luxuries that every child dreams of. At 7, one of his daughters became a dance partner for Andy Lau at performances, basking in the bright lights of the stage and receiving admiration from everyone. In contrast, for Huang Qiyuan's daughters, after the divorce, Jet Li would only call to check on them once or twice a month. But after his remarriage, even these calls became less frequent. The coldness from their father made Li Si become quiet and uncommunicative. Even her younger sister, Dai Mei, noticed a significant change in her character. She was very worried. Li Si had one rule: never mention Jet Li in front of her. Whenever Dai Mei brought up their father, Li Si would immediately fall silent or leave the conversation. Later, she forbade her sister from contacting their father privately. When Li Si entered high school, her mother, Huang Qiyuan, remarried. By then, her financial situation was sufficient to support her daughters. Through a conversation with her ex-husband, Huang Qiyuan learned how much her daughters resented their father. She agreed to try to reconcile them, on the condition that Li Si and Li Dai would live with her. Regarding her mother's remarriage, Li Si didn't hate it. On the contrary, she was grateful to her stepfather for caring for her mother. Finally, the sisters felt the warmth of a family. With her mother's patient persuasion, Li Si gradually stopped her fierce opposition to her father. On significant occasions, she would send her well-wishers to Jet Li. However, even if they were no longer estranged, they couldn't become close. Later, The media revealed that one of Jet Li and Nina's younger daughters suffered from depression. Li Si then posted on social media, both mocking and bitterly saying, "They shine in the love of thousands. What's there to be sad about? We grew up like weeds, yet we are stronger." Now Li Si is 36 years old, but remains single. It's unclear how long it will take for her to escape the shadow cast by her parents' broken marriage. Meanwhile, Jet Li is over 60. Recently, his health has been deteriorating. Images of his white hair and wrinkled, aging face have fans very worried about the actor's health. Clearly, in terms of career, Jet Li has excelled, but as a father, he has many shortcomings. Because every small act of affection he shows to his younger daughters becomes an invisible knife stabbing into the hearts of his older daughters, causing them pain. Emotions are always hard to control. We cannot deny the love between Jet Li and Nina, but we also cannot deny the pain that Huang Qiyuan, Li Si, and Li Dai had to endure from Jet Li's selfish happiness. When choosing to enter marriage or any relationship, we must have responsibility. While we should respect the right to leave, it's hard to forgive someone who has caused others to suffer for a long time. For parents, every decision directly affects their children's upbringing. A lonely, painful childhood can have severe consequences in adulthood. Some children spend their whole life healing from childhood, while others spend their adulthood trying to erase childhood pain. Story 5. If you ask passers-by in South Korea, who is the most famous heir of a chaebol family, half of the respondents would tell you it's Lee Jae-yong, the only son of the late chairman of the Samsung Group. The others would mention two names. First, Cho Hyun-ah, the princess of Korean heir, and the other is Hwang Han-ah, the granddaughter of the chairman of Namyong Dairy Products. The name Hwang Han-ah is probably the most familiar to fans of Korean entertainment, as she is the ex-girlfriend of the star Park Yoo-chun, former member of the famous second-generation K-pop group TVXQ. From the fiancée of a Hallyu superstar to the granddaughter of a chaebol family who was kicked out of the house, what happened to Hwang Han-ah? Namyong Dairy Products is one of the three giants in the dairy industry in South Korea. The company owns many products ranging from dairy, nutritional foods, to real estate. The stock of Namyong Dairy Products once experienced a significant increase. Therefore, although it cannot compare to Samsung or Hyundai, this nutrition conglomerate is also very powerful. Today's main character is Hwang Han-ah, the only granddaughter of the founder of Namyong Dairy Products. Like other heiresses of the wealthy class in Korea, she often uses luxury brands and frequents high-end restaurants. By sharing her luxurious experiences, she has become an influencer on social media. In 2017, the name Hwang Han-ah became more familiar to the public when she became engaged to the star Park Yoo-chun. Park Yoo-chun is a famous singer and actor in the Korean entertainment industry. He is a former member of the K-pop group TVXQ and has starred in many hit dramas like Sung Kyung-kwan's Scandal, Rooftop Prince. In 2015, Park Yoo-chun enlisted in the military. During this time, his reputation was severely damaged due to multiple allegations of abuse by women. In April 2017, paparazzi captured intimate photos of Park Yoo-chun and Hwang Han-ah on the street. Later, both openly revealed they were engaged and would marry in September of that year. But that September, no wedding between the actor and the heiress of the Namyong Dairy Products took place. A few months later, they announced their breakup. Journalists also noticed that the tattoo of Hwang Han-ah's portrait on the former TVXQ member's arm had gradually disappeared. Not long after, on her personal Instagram account, Hwang Han-ah posted a status full of frustration. Although she didn't name the person she was referring to, the keywords used immediately made the public think of her ex-boyfriend, Park Yoo-chun. However, as soon as speculations arose, Hwang Han-ah's post suddenly disappeared. At that time, netizens speculated that the chaebol heiress might be worried about legal issues by targeting her former fiancé, or she had achieved her purpose shortly after posting. No one knew the truth. But the noisy breakup of these two did not end there. Very soon after, Hwang Han-ah was anonymously reported for using banned substances. However, as she continuously refused police requests, the investigation did not proceed smoothly. In April 2019, at a hospital in Gyeonggi-do, after an examination, Hwang Han-ah was found to have used methamphetamine and was immediately arrested. During the interrogation, she partially admitted to the crime, while also accusing her ex-boyfriend, Park Yoo-chun, of secretly injecting the substance into her arm while she was asleep. But of course, This was absurd since they had broken up 2 years prior. Or had they reconciled? After the news broke, Park Yu-chun held a press conference to clear all doubts, affirming his innocence. He committed to assisting the police in the investigation. Park Yu-chun also stated that if he was involved with banned substances, he would immediately withdraw from the entertainment industry. Actor Park Yu-chun said, "Early last year, I decided to go our separate ways with Hwang Han-ah. After the breakup, I was constantly threatened by her. But out of responsibility and feeling that I was also at fault, I did not speak up. I do not use banned substances, nor do I encourage others to use them. To me this is truly unimaginable. I accept the investigation." On one side, Hwang Han-ah insisted that her ex-fiancé was responsible for her positive drug test result. But on the other, during the press conference, the drama heartthrob shed tears and affirmed his innocence. The battle between them escalated. The police identified Park Yu-chun as the main suspect. Both he and Hwang Han-ah had their personal assets seized and case files opened. After a few days, the investigation team found traces of crystal meth on Park Yu-chun's legs. The actor was arrested urgently. It turned out that the tears and vows from the previous press conference were nothing but a performance. In this case, both defendants claimed the other was the mastermind. Not long after, the court sentenced both Park Yu-chun and Hwang Han-ah to 2 years suspended prison sentences for drug use. They were immediately released. After the verdict was announced, the prosecution quickly appealed, arguing that Hwang Han-ah had been suspected of drug use for many years, thus requiring a harsher penalty to prevent recidivism. However, the appellate court dismissed all appeals, maintaining the initial decision. This ruling led the public to question whether Chaebol families had exerted pressure on the court, given the surprisingly lenient sentence compared to the negative impact these two had on society. In fact, this was not the first time Hwang Han-ah had been suspected of involvement with stimulants. In 2015, when arresting a group of students caught using banned substances illegally, one of them claimed to have gotten the goods from Hwang Han-ah and then used them together. In the investigation records concerning crystal meth, Hwang Han-ah's name appeared 7 to 8 times, but in the end, it was always deemed there was insufficient evidence and the recommendation was not to prosecute. After the 2019 incident, the heiress of the Namyang dairy products showed no remorse. She even bragged to acquaintances that even while under investigation, she was invited into the police chief's office. A photo proving this was also posted on social media. When an audio recording of Hwang Han-ah's foolish statements was leaked, public anger was immense, to the extent that the company behind this heiress also faced consequences. At that time, Hong Won-sik, the chairman of Namyang Dairy Products and Hwang Han-ah's uncle, who was very close to the police chief, sent an apology letter regarding the methamphetamine allegations against his niece. The businessman also expressed his disgust towards his niece and affirmed that Hwang Han-ah was not involved in the company's operations. Although on the surface, Namyang Dairy Products and the Hwang family had severed all connections, in reality, her mother still held shares in the corporation. Over the years, she had used the family's influence to whitewash her daughter's reputation. As for Hwang Han-ah, despite saying she wanted to go home to reflect, she continued to post about her lavish, extravagant lifestyle on social media every day. In June 2020, the heiress of the Namyang Group posted a lengthy message on social media. Little did she know that 6 months later, she would again be investigated for drug violations, while her suspended sentence was still in effect. The difference with this case was that 2 more individuals were investigated alongside the Chaebol heiress. Both of these individuals committed suicide after confessing. One of them was Oh Se-young, the mysterious fiancé Hwang Han-ah had never revealed. In September 2020, Oh Se-young went to the police station and confessed that he had hallucinations due to methamphetamine use. He admitted to being Hwang Han-ah's boyfriend and claimed he had secretly injected the substance into her arm while she was asleep. Indeed, this testimony was entirely consistent with what Hwang Han-ah had claimed in the case involving Park Yu-chun. However, unlike the strong denials from her former boyfriend, her fiancé from the Oh family confessed everything. Was Hwang Han-ah a sleeping beauty? Why did both of her boyfriends do this while she was dreaming? This time, the police were determined to investigate thoroughly. They were suspicious. How could Oh Se-young inject Hwang Han-ah's arm so skillfully if he was only just playing with drugs? Perhaps out of deep love for his girlfriend, throughout the investigation, Oh Se-young consistently insisted that everything was his doing to Hwang Han-ah. In October 2020, despite being under investigation, Huang Hana and her fiancé from the O family secretly registered their marriage. Unlike her usual ostentatious and attention-seeking behavior, this time the heiress was very discreet. However, not long after, on December 18th, Huang Hana got into trouble again when she sneaked into a friend's house and stole some cosmetics, clothes, and designer bags. When discovered, her friend directly posted the elevator surveillance video on social media, revealing that Huang Hana had continued to illegally use methamphetamine. The police immediately began verifying information from witnesses, arresting Huang Hana, Oh Se-yong, and the person who sold to them. At this point, Huang Hana suspected that her newlywed husband had revealed her secrets to her wealthy best friend, so she harmed herself in front of him to ensure he couldn't betray her again. This self-injury tactic might have deceived her husband, Oh Se-yong, but it couldn't fool the Huang Hana couldn't escape the investigation. On December 20th, when she was taken in for questioning by the police, her father personally accompanied her. However, immediately after the investigation concluded, the family of the Chaebol heiress announced that she had run away and her whereabouts were unknown. Huang Hana's mother was also suspected of delivering a letter from her daughter to her son-in-law, Oh Se-yong. It became evident that Huang Hana and her mother had always used this method to coerce their son-in-law from the Oh family. On December 22, 2020, Oh Se-yong called a friend, saying he wanted to confess at the Yongsan police station in Seoul and to deny his previous statements. After this call, Oh Se-yong ended his life at his home, leaving behind a letter stating, "I am sorry for involving Huang Hana with banned substances." Why did the content of the letter completely differ from what he said on the phone? Was this letter indeed written by Oh Se-yong? Friends of Oh Se-yong reported that he had shown no signs of wanting to commit suicide before. Everything happened so suddenly. Oh Se-yong had even said that crimes related to stimulants would at most result in 3 to 6 months of imprisonment. Clearly, he was not afraid of the sentence. So what made him so fearful that he took his own life? Immediately after, a close friend of Oh Se-yong posted a lament on social media, accusing Huang Hana of being involved in the sudden death of his friend and another key witness in the case. It was quite possible that the death of her fiancé would once again help her escape legal punishment. Many conspiracy theories were circulated online suggesting that both did not commit suicide, but were made to look like they did. Huang Hana was not just a suspect, she might very well be the true perpetrator of these two deaths. Some even jokingly said that Park Yu-chun was lucky to keep his life when he broke up with the Chaebol heiress. Many were convinced that behind these inexplicable events was the manipulation of Huang Hana and the control of Namyang Dairy Products. Could this corporation really do that? Ultimately, how powerful and influential are the Chaebols in Korea? Since the incident between Huang Hana and Park Yu-chun, Namyang Dairy Products has faced immense pressure. All figures related to sales, stocks, or corporate image have plummeted drastically, but what Huang Hana did was still nothing compared to the damage to her family's business. In 2013, a dealer for Namyang's nutrition brand reported to the Korea Fair Trade Commission about being forced to sell products that were close to expiration or hard to sell. When the issue first arose, the corporation sued the retailer for defamation, while demanding to cancel contracts with all protesting dealers. These stores wouldn't be able to reclaim their franchise fees of 150 million won because they were held responsible for the contract terminations. In May 2013, an audio recording of a Namyang Nutrition Company employee severely cursing out dealers spread across social media. Although the company immediately fired the employee, a boycott of Namyang products erupted. The Korea Fair Trade Commission launched an investigation, and Namyang Dairy Products was found to have violated the law, fined 123 billion won. By August 2013, Namyang's stock price had fallen disastrously to 800,000 won. The corporation's senior management held an official press conference to apologize to the nation. However, during this press conference, the chairman and members of the Huang Hana family did not appear or comment. In 2020, with Huang Hana's second drug-related accusation and the suicides of 2 witnesses, Namyang Dairy Products' stock price dropped sharply to 300,000 won. On January 15, 2021, while their products continued to be boycotted, the sales of their main revenue-generating powdered milk were heavily impacted by the declining birth rate, leading to a 92% drop in Namyang Dairy Products' operating profit. In response, the company introduced several new brands to avoid detection, gradually escaping the wave of opposition. However, on social media, participants in the boycott movement frequently shared Namyang Dairy's brands and products, even developing an app to automatically identify their products via barcode. Namyang Dairy continued to hire an advertising company to target competitors to undermine their credibility. After becoming a hot topic in the news, Namyang Dairy Products posted an apology on social media. However, this post was criticized for lacking sincerity, with every word seemingly evading responsibility and not admitting fault. More and more of the company's misdeeds were exposed, from unfair treatment of retail dealers, hiring online trolls to defame competitors, to false advertising for circulating substandard products. In these years, Korean netizens said, "Hwang Hana and Namyang Dairy Products are finished here." On January 7, 2021, alongside the investigation related to actor parasite Lee Sung-kyun's suicide due to public pressure over drug scandal, Hwang Hana was arrested once again for drug use. This time, she received a sentence of 1 year and 6 months for using banned substances during her probation. The reason an evil heiress could exist is that her entire family stood behind to protect her. What's more frightening is that even a relatively small corporation like Namyang Dairy could manipulate power. Story 6. In the frigid winter of 1958, America was shaken by a series of horrific crimes committed by two individuals too young to fully grasp the consequences of their actions. Charles Starkweather, age 19, and his 14-year-old girlfriend, Carol Fugate, embarked on a ruthless journey of death, spreading terror across Nebraska and neighboring regions. In less than 2 months, 11 lives were taken, including Carol's family, friends, strangers, and even Good Samaritans, simply because they were in the wrong place at the wrong time. Brutal, cold-blooded, and seemingly unremorseful, this pair became a blueprint for countless villains in popular culture, from films and music to novels. But what lay behind this string of serial killings? Blind love? Insanity? Or were they victims of a distorted adolescence marked by poverty and isolation? The story of Charles and Carol isn't just a tale of massacre. It's a psychological tragedy riddled with contradictions, dividing American public opinion to this day. Was Carol a willing accomplice or a coerced child? And why has America remained obsessed with this couple for over half a century? Charles Starkweather was born on November 24, 1938, the third child of Guy and Helen Starkweather, who later had 6 more children. The family lived in Lincoln, Nebraska, the primary setting of To understand what drove this couple to their merciless spree, and how they became cultural icons, we must start at the root, Charles's childhood and adolescence. Because initially he showed, I must emphasize, absolutely no signs of becoming a criminal. The Starkweather family wasn't well off. Charles's father, Guy, worked as a carpenter but suffered from chronic hand pain. Back then, conditions like arthritis were difficult to treat, plunging the family into financial hardship. Though Guy desperately wanted to work, the pain limited his ability to do so consistently, causing their income to dwindle. To support the family and raise their children, Charles's mother, Helen, worked as a waitress at a small local cafe. But their life was far from the American dream. The Starkweathers lived in poverty, constantly worrying whether they'd have enough money for next week's meals. This level of struggle was relatively rare at the time, so it's worth noting that Charles wasn't a victim of domestic abuse. Guy and Helen were respected by neighbors and townsfolk as resilient people who did everything they could to support their family through honest labor. Guy felt immense guilt for his inability to work steadily. Instead of giving up, turning to alcohol, or taking out his frustrations on his children, as many did during that era, he stayed home to help his wife, cooking, cleaning, and tending to the household. When his joint pain subsided, he'd return to his carpentry work. Charles required more attention than his siblings due to congenital disabilities. For starters, he was short, barely 5 feet 2 inches, with a distinctive hunched posture that prevented him from standing straight. He also struggled with mobility due to bow legs, a condition where his knees bent inward. Beyond that, Charles suffered from severe stuttering and extreme nearsightedness. However, in that era, childhood vision problems weren't given proper attention. Today, if a child frequently complains of headaches at school or struggles to see the board, parents are advised to get their vision tested immediately. But for Charles, despite teachers noticing his difficulties with reading and learning, which relied heavily on textbooks back then, they simply labeled him as lazy and somewhat slow. Clearly, his studies were severely impacted because everything appeared blurry to him. It wasn't until his teenage years that he realized something was wrong, unable to see objects clearly beyond 12 inches, while his friends could read signs at the end of the street. These differences made Charles odd in the eyes of his peers. Unsurprisingly, he became a target of bullying. Like many children, Charles couldn't understand why he was treated so cruelly and didn't know how to cope. A child raised in a loving family, always polite to others, couldn't fathom the rejection and harshness he faced. That pain Charles silently endured, and he never forgot it. As he entered his teenage years, Charles underwent a drastic transformation. Once a gentle, likable boy, he became withdrawn and cold. His peers no longer dared to tease him, they began to fear him. More significantly, Charles Starkweather was now ready to fight back with violence if anyone crossed him. Those around him at the time described him as a ticking time bomb, needing only a small spark to explode. During his coming-of-age years, like many American youths of the time, Charles discovered the film Rebel Without a Cause, a cinematic portrayal of a 17-year-old boy at odds with his family, searching for his place in society and clashing with the law. The movie quickly became a cultural icon for young people, inspiring every boy to emulate James Dean, the film's lead actor. This image deeply captivated Charles. He began mimicking James Dean's style, his clothing, gestures, and mannerisms, watching the film repeatedly to embody the character and learn how to react in various situations like the on-screen rebel. Surprisingly, this transformation worked. With his new look, no one dared to mock Charles anymore. From a lonely, friendless boy, he became a cool, mysterious young man who knew how to dress. And most importantly, no one dared to mess with him. Vanessa and Jessica, two names chosen entirely at random, started noticing Charles. This brought him a bit of joy, but to maintain his guard, he cultivated an air of mystery, often casting challenging glances at others in the school hallways. Those looks he delivered with undeniable coolness. A small detail worth noting, the film La Fureur de Vivre, which inspired Charles, is actually a relatively loose adaptation of Robert Lindner's book Rebel Without a Cause, a story about a person with psychological issues. Thanks to his new persona, Charles gradually made friends at school. Bob Von Bush, his best friend, later recalled, "He could be the best guy you'd ever meet. He'd do anything for you if he liked you. He was also really funny, but everything seemed like a joke to him, and he had another side. He could be unbelievably cruel. If he saw a guy who was taller, better looking, or dressed nicer than him on the street, he'd find a way to bring them down and humiliate them." As Charles grew older, his behavior increasingly alarmed those around him. His academic performance was dismal, and his propensity for violence grew. Whenever his parents reprimanded him, he reacted with anger. Unsure how to manage their son, they decided to find him a simple job, hoping he'd leave the education system and become independent. At 18, Charles found work at a warehouse, where his daily task was stacking boxes. But the job didn't go well. Charles worked half-heartedly, and his boss called him the slowest employee in the warehouse. Despite lacking steady employment, Charles maintained a close friendship with Bob Von Bush, who had a girlfriend. Bob's girlfriend had a younger sister, and Bob wanted to introduce her to Charles, hoping he'd find a romantic connection. That sister was Carol in Fugate. In 1956, Charles met Carol, who would later become his accomplice in a cross-country crime spree that claimed over 10 lives. At the time, Carol was just 13, while Charles was 18. The age gap was undeniably concerning, no debate needed, and her minor status would later be considered during the trial. Their romance blossomed quickly, and Charles took a job near Carol's school, allowing them to meet almost daily. They'd stroll through the woods, drink, have lunch, and Charles even taught Carol to drive. He borrowed his father's 1949 Ford and let Carol take the wheel. Being her first time driving, she inevitably lost control, crashing into another car. Naturally, Guy, Charles's father, had to cover the repair costs. Charles had no money, and the car was damaged. After this incident, Guy, though heartbroken, decided to kick his son out of the house. Charles's escalating violence, his relationship with a young girl, and his unauthorized use of the family car had pushed them beyond their limits. Around the same time, Charles was fired from his second job. He then landed a gig as a garbage collector, a role that began to reshape his worldview. There was no guiding light amidst the trash, but passing by lavish mansions, affluent neighborhoods, and shiny cars only fueled the rebellious fire within him. The job made him feel small, insignificant, as if his life was worth nothing and his work was menial. Later, he bitterly remarked, "Who cares about a garbage man?" During his routes, Charles's mind began crafting dark scenarios. The wealthy homes he visited to collect trash stoked his desire to break in, even to kill the owners. Deep down, he harbored an intense hatred for successful wealthy people who could afford beautiful homes. In Charles's twisted logic, eliminating them would bring everyone back to the same starting line, because in death, everyone is equal. It was a warped philosophy, but one Charles was determined to. On November 30th, 1957, Charles, now 19 years old, walked into a gas station, intending to buy a small stuffed toy he'd had his eye on as a gift for Carol, but he didn't have enough money. He promised the station manager, 21-year-old Robert Calvert, that he'd return later to pay. Robert, unsurprisingly, refused. There was no familiarity between them, despite Charles's insistence that he lived nearby and would keep his word. Taking goods without payment from a stranger was simply unacceptable. Charles was kicked out of the store. Rage and humiliation boiled within him, and he gritted his teeth, vowing to return and settle the score. "Fine, I'll come back and pay for that damn toy," he muttered under his breath. The next day, Charles returned to the gas station, pretending to buy a pack of cigarettes and some gum to see if Robert was still at the counter. He was determined not to let this go. Charles left the store, covered his face with a scarf, put on a hat, loaded his shotgun, and returned. The robbery began, and in less than 2 hours, Charles Starkweather was about to commit his first murder, marking the moment he'd experience a twisted sense of pleasure. Inside the gas station, Robert didn't resist or try to play the hero. He had a wife and a months-old daughter. His life wasn't worth risking over the $100 in the cash drawer. But Charles didn't stop. The ease of the situation unnerved him. He had expected Robert to beg or cry, but instead, he was met with silence, another perceived insult. Charles forced Robert out of the station, took his car keys, and made him sit in the passenger seat. Charles drove toward rural Nebraska. This was one of the rare times he ventured beyond Lincoln, where he'd lived his entire life. But he wanted to take Robert to a remote area to mentally torture him for as long as possible. Robert gradually realized that if he didn't act, he'd be tormented to death like an animal. When Charles stopped the car in the desolate wilderness and ordered Robert to get out, the gas station manager feigned compliance, then suddenly lunged at Charles as he turned away. It was his only chance to survive. In the middle of nowhere, facing an armed opponent, he had to take the risk or face certain death. Both men were of similar build and age, making the struggle fierce. Neither gained a clear upper hand, but in the end, Robert Calvert, 21, was shot. He collapsed, blood pouring out. In his final moments, he knew he'd never see his daughter grow up. Charles had just taken a life for the first time, and he felt a strange exhilaration. All the resentment and inferiority he'd harbored for so long, the feeling of being a worthless failure, suddenly vanished. He felt powerful, as if he'd finally gained control. He had $100 in his pocket, a girlfriend, and had just killed a man without anyone knowing. But in reality, Charles was sinking into a dangerous delusion, a state of sick euphoria after murdering an innocent man in the middle of nowhere. That thrill, however, faded as quickly as a soap bubble, especially when he was fired from his job for chronic tardiness, unauthorized absences, and a complete lack of motivation. Charles was broke again. Rent and utility bills piled up, and his landlady even cut off the heat in the dead of winter. January and February, bone-chilling months in Nebraska. Charles had nothing left. The rush from his first murder had vanished. For weeks, he couldn't see Carol. Her parents had forbidden them from seeing each other. Carol had also gained weight recently, leading her family to suspect she might be pregnant. But Charles didn't give up. To him, Carol was everything. He barely spoke to his own parents, had no job, no money, and was spiraling deeper into his own darkness. On January 21st, nearly 2 months after his first murder, a crime still shrouded in secrecy, Charles went to Carol's home. He knocked on the door and faced her parents, Velda and Marion Bartlett, who immediately demanded he leave and stay away from their daughter, threatening to call the police and report him as a predator if he approached her again. But the events that unfolded in Carol Fagate's house on January 21st, 1958, would forever seal the couple's fate. Charles returned a few hours later, this time with a gun. Back then, locking doors wasn't common practice. He walked in effortlessly, gun in hand, and shot the first person he saw, Carol's stepfather, Marion Bartlett, who fell dead on the spot. Velda appeared, barely registering what was happening, and was shot in the face. A cry echoed from upstairs. To this day, what happened next remains shrouded in mystery. Charles and Carol later blamed each other. But in one room, 2-year-old Betty, awakened by the gunshots and screaming, was brutally killed. Now, no one could keep Charles and Carol apart. Together, they disposed of the bodies behind the house in a twisted bonding ritual. Carol's stepfather was dumped on the floor of the chicken coop, her mother was hidden in an outhouse, and her sister's body was stuffed into a barrel, also placed in the outhouse. Charles and Carol spent hours cleaning the interior of the house. Afterward, Carol hung a small sign on the door, announcing that the family had the flu and requesting no visitors. That evening, the couple casually sat watching TV and eating potato chips, showing no intention of fleeing or seeking help. Carol appeared eerily relaxed, despite her entire family having just been murdered, their bodies beginning to decompose and reek in the chicken coop and outhouse. The next day, when Carol's uncle came to check on the family after noticing the odd sign, Carol answered the door, insisting everyone was still sick and advising him not to come in. Investigations later revealed that several people visited the house over the following days, and each time, Carol was the one who appeared, lying to keep them from entering. This detail is crucial, because by the end of the story, Carol would adopt a very particular defense strategy that you'll find noteworthy. Naturally, as time passed, no one believed that the family flu story anymore. Since January 21st, no one had seen Carol's stepfather or mother. Neighbors and finally reported the situation to the police. When investigators arrived on January 27th, they found the house relatively clean, no obvious signs of foul play, until they discovered Marion's body in the chicken coop, followed by Velda and Betty's bodies in the outhouse. By then, Charles and Carol had fled hours earlier, driving hundreds of miles away. Their crime spree had officially begun. On the road, Charles quickly realized two major issues. First, their car was in poor condition, which would be a disadvantage if pursued. Second, the car was registered in his name. If the police released the license plate, he'd be caught immediately. Carol then had an idea. A family friend, August Meyer, lived on a remote farm nearby. They could go to him, gain his trust, and steal his car. Charles found the plan feasible, and they headed to August Meyer's farm to execute their dark scheme. Carol introduced Charles to August Meyer, who warmly invited them in for coffee and conversation. He remarked how much Carol had grown since he last saw her, and noted he hadn't heard from her parents in a while. He kindly asked about her family, her sister, and then August Meyer suddenly collapsed, taking his last breath. Charles and Carol grabbed a few bills, then shot the dog in the yard. A completely senseless act, as the innocent animal posed no threat, but still took a bullet to the head. With that, they drove off in August Meyer's car. However, these masterminds didn't take the highway, opting instead for dirt roads to avoid detection by any patrols that might have been alerted to the family massacre. As a result, they meandered through back roads, and the car eventually got stuck. Their total escape time was less than 48 hours, a pitiful record for fugitives. Charles remained calm, keeping his gun close. They decided to hitchhike. A young couple, 17-year-old Robert Jensen and 16-year-old Carol King, stopped to help. That fateful decision became a death sentence for both. They assumed Charles and Carol were around their age, seemed friendly, and just needed a ride. After a few minutes of cheerful small talk about the weather and trivial matters, Charles suddenly pulled his gun, forcing Robert to drive into a secluded forest. In that situation, with a gun to the back of your head, compliance is the only option. Robert and Carol were ordered out of the car, both utterly terrified. They couldn't comprehend what they'd done wrong. They were just helping someone, and now they were being threatened at gunpoint. Charles coldly shot Robert. He then approached Carol with intent to assault her, but hesitated. Robert's lifeless body lay nearby. Carol screamed in horror, and Carol's pleading eyes met his. All of this stopped Charles from following through with the assault. In the end, Carol was also killed. By this point, Charles and Carol had murdered 6 people, including Carol's family, and their spree wasn't over. Robert and Carol's bodies were left behind near August Meyer's stuck car. The couple continued their escape in their new vehicle, Robert's car, but fleeing, killing, and disposing of bodies left them famished. The fear of being recognized if they stopped at roadside diners was too great. By now, their descriptions had likely been broadcast on the radio. So where would they find food? They decided to break into a house, hold the occupants at gunpoint, and force them to prepare a meal. With nowhere left to hide, and only familiar with their old haunts, Charles and Carol returned near Lincoln, Nebraska. They targeted a wealthy neighborhood, the class Charles had always despised since his days as a garbage collector. He'd long dreamed of entering a luxurious mansion and slaughtering everyone inside. Now he was about to turn that dark fantasy into reality. Their next victims were the Ward family, living on 24th Street. Lauer Ward was a successful businessman, well known in the area for his kindness and exceptional treatment of employees, a rare model of a boss. When Charles and Carol broke into the house, Lauer was out. They held the maid at gunpoint, ordering her to cook for them. Earlier, they had shot Clara Ward, Lauer's wife, because she screamed too loudly upon seeing two armed strangers burst into her home. The maid, Ludmila Fenkel, cooked for the killers while sobbing and begging for her life. She explained she was just a hired worker, uninvolved in the situation, living a lonely life, 50 years old, never married, childless, and with few friends. Knowing the homeowners were wealthy, she offered to show them where the money was hidden if they spared her. At that moment, Lauer returned home, dressed sharply after a morning of work. He closed the door and called for his wife. But before he could hear a response, Charles, waiting at the top of the stairs, took aim from a perfect angle and shot him in the head. The man collapsed, and Charles nonchalantly returned to the kitchen to finish his meal. After eating, the maid was tied to a bed, beaten, and ultimately killed in a brutal manner. Charles and Carol quickly ransacked the house, taking some cash and jewelry, before fleeing in Lauer's car, heading toward Wyoming. The Ward family massacre left behind a 14-year-old son at boarding school, absent during the tragedy. After the horrific discovery of the Wards and the maid's bodies, one of the largest manhunts of the 20th century was launched by U.S. authorities. News of the crime spree spread rapidly beyond the county. Nebraska authorities ordered the Lincoln sheriff to conduct door-to-door searches, inspecting every home, warehouse, and abandoned structure in the area to track down the couple believed to be driving Lauer Ward's car. Details of the vehicle were broadcast widely on radio channels, forcing Charles and Carol to realize they needed to ditch the car as soon as possible. They made their way to Douglas, Wyoming, about an 8-hour drive from Lincoln, where law enforcement was already mobilizing a massive search effort. At a small, secluded roadside parking lot, they spotted a man sleeping soundly in his car. This time, Charles didn't hesitate for a second. In a state of extreme paranoia, terrified of being caught at any moment, he approached with his gun drawn. The unfortunate man was shot instantly. Charles and Carol hurriedly jumped into the stolen vehicle. A problem arose. The automotive industry in the late 1950s was undergoing rapid changes, and Charles, coming from a poor background, was clueless about modern car features. He only knew the basics: insert the key, press the clutch, hit the gas, and drive. But the car they had just stolen had its handbrake engaged. It sounds unbelievable, but Charles had no idea what a handbrake was. He turned the key, the engine roared, but the car wouldn't budge. Chaos erupted inside the vehicle. A passerby, hearing the unusual engine noise, approached to ask if Charles needed help. But by then, Charles had slipped into extreme paranoia, suspecting a trap or fearing the delay would jeopardize their escape. He pulled out a knife, threatening the man to leave immediately. Unfortunately, the man didn't back off, and at that moment, a nearby patrolling officer witnessed the scene and decided to intervene to de-escalate the situation. Realizing Charles was moments away from being arrested, or might even attack the officer, Carol made a shocking move. In a split second, she betrayed him. She flung open the car door, ran out, and broke down in tears, screaming that Charles was a murderer, extremely dangerous, and that she never wanted any part of this. The entire scene unfolded in just 10 seconds. Charles instantly realized he'd been betrayed. If he wanted to survive, he had to flee before the officer could react. Charles scrambled back to the old car, the one he'd stolen from the Ward residence, and this time, he figured out how to start it, shift gears, press the gas, and speed off. Every police unit in Douglas was immediately alerted. Charles Starkweather was in the area and had just escaped. A high-speed chase ensued, stretching across miles of road. Police fired continuously, knowing Charles was armed and highly dangerous. One bullet pierced the windshield, grazed Charles's ear, and lodged into the front windshield. Blood streamed down his face, staining his hands, hair, and nearly getting into his eyes. Charles panicked, believing he was about to die. He pulled over, stepped out with his hands raised, begging the police to take him to a hospital. It was a far from glorious end. After a medical check, his injury turned out to be minor, just a shallow cut from the grazing bullet, with significant bleeding, but no threat to his life. Charles Starkweather and Carol Fugate were arrested and extradited back to Nebraska, where most of their crimes took place. When asked about agreeing to the extradition, Charles consented immediately, naively believing that being tried in his home state would spare him the death penalty, as the governor at the time was known for opposing capital punishment. But Charles miscalculated. Politics is an unpredictable game. The governor might oppose the death penalty, but if executing a nationally despised criminal could boost his votes in the upcoming election, there was no reason for him to refuse. Charles had misjudged a critical move in this high-stakes game. Charles and Carol were interrogated separately for an extended period, allowing investigators to reconstruct the full timeline of events. Each chose a distinct defense strategy. Charles claimed he had coerced Carol into joining his crime spree, but over time, she developed a thrill for stealing and taking lives, eventually becoming a willing accomplice. He insisted she could have left at any time, and even had access to weapons. If she truly felt threatened, shooting him would have been easy. According to Charles, Carol killed Carol King out of jealousy. Conversely, Carol adamantly claimed she was kidnapped by Charles right after he massacred her family. She stated she wasn't present during the murders, and when she returned home, Charles told her that her family had been abducted and he needed to flee. However, this account starkly contradicted the statements of witnesses who interacted with Carol, confirming she answered the door and told them her family was sick, when in reality, they had already been murdered. Carol claimed she was too terrified to escape, fearing Charles would find her and kill her before he was caught. Her defense attorney portrayed her as a 14-year-old girl, manipulated and living in constant terror, merely trying to survive alongside a mentally disturbed boyfriend. But the public, jury, and judge didn't buy this defense. To them, Charles and Carol were a notorious criminal duo, reveling in a depraved spree of murders across the state. Both were tried on similar charges. On May 23, 1958, at the age of 20, Charles Starkweather was sentenced to death. He didn't appeal and was executed just over a year later, at midnight on June 25, 1959. On the electric chair, Charles remained silent until the end, but left a letter for his father, writing, "Dad, I don't really regret what I did. For the first time, Carol and I felt truly happy." Witnesses described Charles as utterly detached, accepting his fate with indifference. While many death row inmates scream or beg for forgiveness, Charles sat silently, awaiting the fatal surge of electricity. As for Carol, she also faced the possibility of a death sentence. But her young age and gender, a significant factor in the 1960s, resulted in a life sentence instead. She served 27 years in a women's prison before being released for good behavior in June 1976, at age 33. Afterward, she moved to a small town in Michigan, working at a hospital and caring for children to make a living. Recent reports indicate she married in 2007 to Frederick Clerk, a meteorologist, until August 2013, when they were involved in a serious car accident. Frederick died, but Carol survived. Decades later, the saga of Charles Starkweather and Carol Fugate continues to haunt and captivate the public. They've inspired numerous films like Natural Born Killers, Badlands in California, as well as characters in Stephen King's stories. Nearly 70 years after the tragedy, many still recall the deadly journey that claimed 10 lives, not counting Robert Calvert, the first victim Charles killed when he was still acting alone. That brings us to the end of this case. As the rain falls and the night deepens, thank you for being here with me at Radio Night Crime. True crime stories remind us of life's mysteries and the need to stay aware, even in the stillness of the night. If you enjoyed tonight's story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Let the sound of the rain lull you to sleep, and until next time, stay safe, stay curious, and let the night keep you company.